I'm Jim Sells. I'm from Atlanta, and I've come to Oshkosh 8 years in a row now, and many years prior to that, before I did some skipping. And I'm here. I brought a C-47 that they needed for the Warbird review, and I brought it up here, and of course enjoying the week. How it all got started, life can spin on a dime so quickly. There was nobody in aviation in my family. I'm 16 and a half years old. I go to California to live with my dad. I'm a workaholic, always have been. So I've got money in my pocket, flipping burgers and, in high school. And this guy comes in one night into Jack in the Box, and he's got a propeller in the back seat. And I start harassing him. Go ahead and buy a Chevrolet. Don't try to put that propeller on the Ford. And, ultimately, he hands me a card. Says, come take a flying lesson. And I had to make him explain it. I didn't know what he was talking about. And he rented Cessna 150s and had flight instructors and taught people to fly. So I still didn't get real excited. I put it in my pocket. And just coincidentally, I get home and my dad says, you're 16. I don't know what to get you for Christmas. What do you want? Well, I got money in my pocket. I buy what I want. I can't buy a car. No parking. So I just pulled that card out and I said, well, Dad, do you want to pay for a flying lesson? He said, no. Why would you do that? So I took the lesson. It's very interesting to me still. I'm so alive with that moment still. It's kind of cool. I'm sitting in the airplane and, we're taxiing out. And even rolling down the runway, it's kind of cool. But when he pulled back and we left the ground and he started that right turn on my side, I just was going crazy. It was just the coolest thing I had ever seen. And by the time we left the pattern, which was just one turn and out of the pattern, I was hooked for life. And I'm still here. It's just been so exciting. And for everybody out there that only has an hour or very little time, it's a step, one step at a time. And you get enough steps, and you go up one rung on the ladder, and you get enough steps, and here I am. I'm flying 3 different C-47s and just having a great time, and T-6s, and aviation's been fabulous for the last 55 years. So I took that first lesson and was just totally hooked on this, and I had a million questions, and I devoted myself. I'm still in school full time. I'm still working 40 hours a week at the flipping hamburgers for Jack in the Box. I devoted my evening study and my weekend money I devoted to taking flying lessons, and 5.5 months later, on my 17th birthday, I got my private pilot's license. And then we moved to Dallas, and that year I went to work at the airport gassing airplanes and learned how to really build time inexpensively compared to paying for all the lessons. Then I received my commercial license and flight instructor rating right out of high school, and started my first semester of college as the flight instructor for the Navy Dallas Flying Club. So I was having a great time, but as luck would have it, I didn't keep up. I didn't get enough credits for a semester, and the draft was breathing down my neck. So the Army, I signed up for the Army. I passed their test and signed up for the Army to go in as a warrant officer candidate for helicopters. And it's on the news every night. It's terrifying, but if your choices are to do that or get drafted and be in the jungle, that choice is made for you, especially when you're already a commercial pilot. And then things went very well for me. I got to rotary wing flight school. They found out I had a commercial license, and me and a dozen others out of 185 were pulled aside and sent to fixed wing. So I wound up flight school for the Army, and then in Vietnam flying bird dogs. And great airplane to fly, just a great experience. Actually, it worked out well for me. I came home from the tour uninjured, and then I had VA benefits. Nobody hiring. Everybody's got pilots. There's a million of them that have come back from Vietnam. So I went to aircraft maintenance school, and that was just a big asset for me for the rest of my career. The tour in Vietnam, as you could imagine, was more than a little interesting. But I got to tell you, the closest I came to losing my life in Vietnam. I'm flying the Bird Dog. We're a reconnaissance. We don't carry any weapons other than smoke rockets to mark targets. But we spend all day flying, looking at the jungle for tracks and evidence of the enemy or supplies. And I've got an artillery observer in the back. We find a group of soldiers and they're bivouacking out in the open in the field, so we know they're ours, and we start communicating with them. And then I start flying on, I'm working. And my artillery observer, the cocky guy that he is, says, look, you got to do something for these guys. And I'm really just not in the mood. I mean, I'm just not in the mood. Well, he starts berating me terribly, calling me names and disrespectful. And I'm going home to a decent meal and sleep in a bunk, and these guys are eating 1945 rations and sleeping on the ground in the jungle. He just, how could you not do something for them? They've got an American airplane here. Okay, well, I'm 20 years old. All right. I've had enough of his profanity and abuse. I'll just do something. Now, I've only got about 600 hours. The Army does not teach aerobatics, okay? So I'm a really good straight and level, steep turn kind of guy, but that's it. Well, I can do a wing over. I mean, what's a wing over? We'll pull it up, we'll drop it down on a wing, we'll go on the other way. These guys aren't pilots, they'll love it. So now I've gone from I don't want to do this to I'm going to show off. I get full power, I pull the nose up, and I got it pointing up way further than I've ever done before. But heck, I'm getting ready to turn the other way. So as I get real slow, I start pushing on the opposite rudder to drop that wing down, and at the same time, I pull the power back. What I don't know at this stage of my flying career is I have just done the maneuver to enter an inverted spin. And just like the book will tell you, it flipped on its back and started spinning. Now, I started at 800 feet. I'm like 1,000 feet. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm inverted and I'm spinning. So I did instinctively hit opposite rudder and the spin stopped, thank goodness. Well, I don't know how to roll out of this. I haven't the experience, but I have heard of a split S. I'm going to pull back and I'm going to pull us through and just hope we've got enough room. Well, I know we're real short of room, so I'm pulling as hard as I can. And I'm staying conscious, but the blood is leaving my brain. I'm losing my vision. My vision starts getting darker and darker, and it's just like the movie screen where they round it all down. Literally pinholes is all that's in front of me, and you can't see anything. But I'm pulling so many G's, that's where I am. So obviously I recovered. I'm telling the story. So we recover just above the trees, and I'm terrified. It's the most afraid I've ever been in my life. And I'm trying to catch my breath. Well, this lieutenant in the back is oil canning the plane, slamming his fists against the side. That's the greatest thing anybody's ever done. And he's hitting it, he's pounding the ceiling, you're the best. And he's absolutely going nuts. He has no earthly clue to this day how close he came to dying and how I had no idea what I was doing. I spent the next few minutes not talking, just going straight ahead. I couldn't do anything else. And that was the most afraid I've been in Vietnam, and it was my own fault. I returned from Vietnam. There were no flying jobs. I mean, 1 million guys had come back with far better training and experience that I got in the Army, and there were just no one needed pilots. So my next choice was to have my own FBO, so I went to aircraft maintenance school. I knew I would need aircraft maintenance along with flying capability. And I'm from Dothan, Alabama, so I moved into my grandparents' house who had passed away, and I'm going to school to get my A&P. And while I'm doing that, I found out about this operation, this ag operation that has everything from Pawnees to B-17s. And I go over there to tour these airplanes and wind up actually going to work for them as a mechanic and getting the B-17s ready because they had a contract. And then once the contract started, they put me in the right seat of the B-17. Now we're doing ag work. We're not out going to air shows. Nobody's doing air shows. What is going on today wasn't EAA hadn't even been created yet. This is about 1972, or at least it's not what it is today. So actually, aluminum overcast, I'm flying that airplane, putting out granulated corn cobs with Myrex poison on them for fire ants, doing whole counties. And we're flying them. We're 200 feet. If the wind's up a little bit, a little crosswind, we're at 400 feet. But we fly a 20-mile swath, and like an ag pilot, we turn it around as fast as we can. We're pulling G's up in a turn, slowing it down, dropping a wing down, rolling back in the other direction, moving over just 200 feet from the last swath, and then, or 400 feet, and never imagining that this is one day going to be an immaculate show plane the whole world wants to see. We were working, and it was a phenomenal experience. The way we were able to fly that B-17, and it was a GMOS. It's interesting, you know, the hard part of the B-17 is the takeoff. You've got 4 engines, and any little bit of differential power, especially on the outboard engine, turns the airplane. So getting up to speed on takeoff, after that, it's a docile flying airplane. It's a big wide wing, big fat wing. Not difficult to fly at all, but there's 4 of everything to keep track of. And of course, with radials, you're always looking at oil pressure and temperature. And we flew 20-mile passes. If we didn't have Loran, we had a man on the ground with a balloon that actually held the balloon up, and he moved along the road every time we went by. So we had Loran guidance over that, and carried 12,000, 13,000 pounds of the granulated bait. The bait was where the hopper was. We made a hopper out of the Bombay area, the bomb area, and then internally in the wings had augers to take the bait out, to spread it out along the wingtips. On the trailing edge of the wing, we had tubes that let it roll out, and the government was paying for it. The state and the government split the bill, and there was a lot going on in the South trying to control fire ants from doing the expanding and the damage to farm animals and communities that they were doing.
Do you remember how many hours you have in the B-17 doing this type of job?
No, I've never been big on logging time, and it was a crop duster. We were just, you know, the end of the week, the end of the month, you'd guess how many hours. Nobody was keeping up with a Hobbs meter. Nobody was writing that down every night. I mean, the mechanic that had to do the maintenance, they were on progressive maintenance. He was probably looking at it, but the pilots, we weren't. We were just flying. It was just work. No.
Was resonating with you the fact that it was a World War II bomber and the importance that the airplane had in the war, or was it just another airplane?
The importance was there, and I'll tell you why. Now, I was busy working trying to make some money, but when the conditions weren't just right, we just sat at the airport waiting for the wind to get right, the temperature to get right, and people would come up. This is the 70s. These B-17, these World War II guys, they're in their 50s and 60s. They're not as old as I am today. So they were always showing up. And I'll tell you, they tell you they were whatever they did on the B-17. But if he said he was a pilot, we always put him in the seat, and in his seat, and then we let him put his hand on the throttles. And I'll tell you, we listen to everybody. But if he inverted his hand to grab hold of that 4-engine gang throttle box, which was the only way you could operate it, we knew this guy was a B-17 pilot. And then he had our attention all day. We listened to everything he had to say, and there were a lot. Hey, the World War II veterans raised me. Everybody with me growing up was a World War II veteran, being born in 1950. And these guys were young, and they'd see the B-17, and they'd pull into the airport. We didn't have the restrictions in 1972 that we have today. They'd pull into the airport, park right next to our trailers, and come out and get in the airplane with us. It was awesome.
Did you fly again after the actual crop dusting experience in the B-17?
Yes, I got into the small planes. That's where the money was. We made money in the B-17, but you had to have a government contract, and it wasn't 2 seasons, spring and the fall. The temperature had to be right, and it wasn't guaranteed. There were times we didn't get contracts. So I was able to get into the small planes, and I did that for 6 years. That was spraying. The B-17 was granulated bait. The small planes was spraying. So I was able to do that 6 years. I had my own FBO and what I'd planned for until deregulation and the airlines started hiring big time. We had, at Dothan Aviation, we had 3 B-17s, and after I left, one of them caught fire, and they didn't have a contract for a couple of years, so I went on to start my own business. But one of the airplanes caught fire, and they had to land in a field, and it burned up, but the pilots got out. The other 2, you know, we never envisioned what would happen, but one is aluminum overcast. One of the ag planes I flew in is here at Oshkosh with the EAA aluminum overcast. The other one is with Liberty Foundation. It was Madras Maiden. They've renamed it now, Ye Old Pub, and I was able to. That's how I got involved with the Liberty Foundation. I asked them. I said, put me in that airplane. Let me work with you and be part of your team. And so I've been able to fly that, and that's also why I could fly the C-47 up here this week. But you know, I left the ag business to go to work for Delta. It was just too clean, too easy after all that hard work and all those chemicals. And 26 years with Delta flying, and I had small airplanes along the way. But when I left Delta, I left 10 years early because I had a real estate business. I'm a real estate investor. And I left 10 years early to do that full time. And I didn't get in an airplane for 10 years. After 40 years of flying nonstop, I walked out of the cockpit and didn't get in the cockpit for 10 years. But when I came back, I bought a Citabria with a friend and started looking around, and boy, the warbirds were back. The warbirds were there. I never envisioned what would happen with these old airplanes. And so I started coming to Oshkosh and seeing the C-47s, the DC-3s, the P-51s, and all of this. And ultimately, one of my, another Delta pilot, retired pilot, was flying a DC-3 out of Atlanta. So I just moved in on him and became his groupie co-pilot, helping him every way I could, doing the things that you need to do to be on the team. And I started flying co-pilot for him. And I'm back in it. Bought a T6, bought a T-34, and just really enjoying the general aviation. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm using the skills I've done. I'm using my time, my talent, my treasure to be part of this historical caretaking, preservation of these old airplanes so that they're here for my grandkids and your grandkids.